Poor single mom takes her son to work, but never expect her baby hug the muscular millionaire and say daddy. Their eyes locked, and something electric passed between them. A current Alyssa couldn't explain and didn't want to acknowledge. Have you ever had a single moment completely upend your carefully constructed life? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. It was just another exhausting night cleaning empty offices until her 4-year-old son bolted across the marble lobby, wrapped his arms around a stranger's legs, and called him daddy. Alyssa Davis froze, spray bottle suspended mid-air, heart stopping as her quiet, shy Elijah, who never spoke to strangers, clung to the tall man in the tailored suit. The entire lobby went still. Security guards, late-night executives, maintenance staff, all eyes locked on the unlikely tableau. A child clinging to Chicago's most untouchable bachelor, and the man's face transforming from shock to something unreadable. Elijah, Alyssa hissed, mortified as she rushed forward. I'm so sorry, sir. He doesn't usually. But Cole Parker, tech genius and notorious ice king of Chicago's business world, didn't brush the child away as expected. Instead, he slowly kneeled, expensive suit pants meeting cold marble, bringing himself eye level with her son. What's your name, little man? His voice was surprisingly gentle. Elijah, her son answered, still clutching the man's sleeve. Where you been, daddy? The whispers erupted immediately. Someone nearby pulled out a phone. Alyssa lunged forward to grab Elijah, but something in Cole Parker's expression stopped her. Recognition flickered across his features, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. Mrs. Chan wants the executive bathrooms redone tonight, her supervisor whispered urgently behind her. And you're bringing your kid to work again? You're gonna get us both fired. Alyssa nodded, attempting to pry Elijah's fingers from the expensive fabric. I'm so sorry about this, Mr. Parker. My babysitter canceled, and I couldn't miss another shift. Cole stood slowly, those ice blue eyes studying her face with unnerving intensity. Have we met before? No, Alyssa said quickly. Too quickly. We haven't. His gaze narrowed slightly. I think we have. Elijah tugged on Cole's pant leg. Can you come home with us tonight? Elijah. Alyssa scooped him up, heart hammering against her ribs. We need to let Mr. Parker go. He's very busy, but he's my daddy. Elijah insisted loudly, causing more heads to turn. Cole's expression shifted, something calculating replacing the initial shock. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card, offering it to her. I think we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Alyssa said, backing away. This is just a misunderstanding. My son's father isn't in the picture, and yet your son seems to think otherwise. His tone remained even controlled. What's your name? That's not important. It is to me. Their eyes locked, and something electric passed between them. A current Alyssa couldn't explain and didn't want to acknowledge. Davis, her supervisor, volunteered, hovering anxiously. Alyssa Davis, one of our best night cleaners. Again, so sorry for the disruption, Mr. Parker. Cole never broke eye contact with her. Ms. Davis, I'd like to speak with you privately. Tomorrow morning, my office. I can't. I have another job. Then I'll come to you. He slipped the card into her reluctant hand. This isn't a request. As security escorted them to the service elevator, Alyssa clutched Elijah to her chest, mind racing. How could her son recognize a man she'd never met? Why did Cole Parker's eyes seem to strip away her carefully constructed walls? And why did his voice stir something deep in her memory? Something just beyond reach. Mommy, why can't Daddy come home? Elijah whispered against her neck. That's not your daddy, baby, she answered, but doubt crept through her veins like ice water. Have you ever had a single moment completely upend your carefully constructed life? What would you do if your child recognized someone you've never met? Share your thoughts below. She'd spent 4 years building walls to protect her son from disappointment. Now a stranger with $1 billion empire was determined to scale them with a single DNA test. 3 days passed without word from Cole Parker. Alyssa convinced herself the incident was forgotten, that a man who controlled half of Chicago's tech industry wouldn't waste time tracking down a night cleaner. The relief lasted exactly until Saturday morning, when a sleek black SUV pulled up outside her apartment building in Detroit. "Mommy, look, a spaceship." Elijah pressed his face against their third-floor window as Cole Parker stepped onto the cracked sidewalk, drawing stares from neighbors who rarely saw vehicles worth more than their homes. His luxury SUV looked obscenely out of place on her block, like a spaceship landed in a junkyard. Neighbors peered from behind curtains as the man who graced business magazines stepped onto her cracked concrete steps. Alyssa's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I'm downstairs. We need to talk." She ignored it, heart pounding as she peered through the peephole minutes later when knocking echoed through her apartment. Cole Parker stood in her dingy hallway, wearing casual clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Go away," she called through the door. "Ms. Davis, I drove 3 hours to see you. I'm not leaving until we talk." "There's nothing to talk about. Your son called me daddy. That seems worth discussing." Alyssa leaned against the door, closing her eyes. "He's 4. Kids make mistakes." "Open the door, Alyssa." The way he said her name sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Daddy's here," Elijah squealed, running toward the door before she could stop him. He struggled with the chain lock, giving Alyssa no choice but to open herself. Cole's eyes found hers immediately, then dropped to Elijah. Something flickered in his expression, a softness that contradicted everything she'd heard about Chicago's coldest executive. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Against her better judgment, Alyssa stepped aside. His broad shoulders made her small apartment shrink even further. He took in the second-hand furniture, the water stains on the ceiling, the makeshift play area in the corner, assessment without judgment in his gaze. "You drive to Chicago every night for cleaning work?" he asked, watching Elijah, who was showing him toy cars. "The pay is better there. I catch a few hours sleep before my day job at the hospital." "As orderly." "Look, Mr. Parker." "Cole." "Mr. Parker," she insisted. "I don't know why my son thought you were his father, but you're not. His father isn't in our lives." Cole's gaze lingered on Elijah's profile, on the shape of his nose, the set of his jaw. "When was he born?" "That's none of your business." "I think it might be." The tension between them crackled like electricity. Alyssa crossed her arms protectively. "What do you want?" "A DNA test," he stated simply, "and answers about why I can't shake the feeling we've met before." Alyssa laughed bitterly. "I clean toilets in your building. Our paths don't exactly cross in social circles. And yet here we are. Would you open your door to someone who could change your child's life forever? Or would you protect the world you've carefully built alone? Drop a comment with what you'd choose." She thought he wanted custody, but what he demanded was much more dangerous. The truth about a night she couldn't remember and he couldn't forget. 3 days later, Cole returned. This time, Alyssa let him in without argument. The fight had drained from her after Elijah's continued insistence that Cole was his daddy, and after discovering what had appeared overnight. "You bought my building?" she demanded as soon as he crossed her threshold. "It was a sound investment. And the code playground you built downstairs? Another sound investment?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "The Codeco playground is for all children in the building. But yes, I had Elijah in mind." Rain pelted her kitchen window as they faced off across her worn table. Her in faded scrubs from her day job, him in a suit worth more than her yearly rent, both trembling with emotions neither would name. "Why are you doing this?" Alyssa asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Because 4 years ago, during the worst storm Chicago had seen in decades, I met a woman at the Drake Hotel bar." His eyes locked with hers. "We talked for hours. She was brilliant, funny, determined, finishing her nursing degree while working nights. When the streets flooded and she couldn't get home, I offered my suite." Alyssa's mouth went dry. "That wasn't me. She had a small birthmark here," he continued, pointing to his collarbone, "shaped like a crescent moon." Unconsciously, Alyssa's hand drifted to her own collarbone, where that exact mark had rested since birth. Cole's eyes tracked the movement. "We spent one night together," he continued, voice dropping lower. "When I woke, she was gone. No name, no number, Just a note saying it was a mistake. I don't remember any of this, Alyssa whispered, but something flickered at the edges of her mind. A luxurious room, rain lashing against windows, gentle hands on her skin. The timing fits, Alyssa. Elijah would have been conceived that night. She shook her head. No, I would remember something like that. Would you? You were exhausted, working multiple jobs while studying. And from what I've researched about your past, you've experienced trauma that might affect memory. You investigated me? Anger flared. I needed to understand why my son called you mommy. He's not your son. Then take the test. Cole placed a DNA kit on the table between them. 2 days for results. Then we'll know. Alyssa stared at the plastic container, heart racing. What if he was right? What if the father of her child wasn't the nameless one-night stand she'd convinced herself of, but this powerful man who could upend everything? And if he is yours, she asked quietly, what then? Then we figure it out. Together. You can't just buy your way into our lives. I'm not trying to. For the first time, vulnerability cracked through his controlled facade. I've spent 4 years looking for the woman from that night. If that woman is you, and if Elijah is my son, I want to know him. Know you. How would you react if someone claimed to share a past with you that you can't recall? Is forgetting sometimes a choice we make to survive? Tell me your thoughts. The memory came back in pieces. A hotel bar, a storm, blue eyes watching her across candlelight. But the most important detail remained hidden. Had she chosen to forget him? Alyssa agreed to the DNA test, swabbing the inside of Elijah's cheek while he giggled, thinking it was a game. Cole's eyes never left her face during the process, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm despite the clinical chill of the situation. That night, after tucking Elijah into bed, Alyssa sat alone in her darkened kitchen, staring at the business card Cole had left. Something about their conversation had knocked loose fragments of memory she couldn't quite grasp, like catching reflections in broken glass. She closed her eyes, trying to remember. Chicago had been drowning that night. Streets turned to rivers, taxis impossible to find. The hotel bar had been a refuge of amber light and piano music when she'd stumbled in, soaked and desperate. She remembered that much. The interview at the hospital had gone poorly, her scholarship was in jeopardy, and the storm had left her stranded miles from her apartment with just $12 in her pocket. But then blue eyes, a gentle voice offering her a drink. Conversation that flowed easier than it ever had with anyone. Why can't I remember his face? She whispered to herself, pressing her palms against her eyes. More fragments came, laughing until her sides hurt, confessing dreams she'd never told anyone. The surprising discovery that the man in the expensive suit had grown up poor too, raised by a single mother. Then the hotel suite. Massive windows showcasing lightning that turned the Chicago skyline into a strobing masterpiece. The minibar raid when they realized room service had stopped. His jacket draped over her shoulders when the air conditioning chilled her damp clothes. And then, heat flooded Alyssa's body as the memory crashed through, his mouth on hers, tentative at first, then hungry. Her back against cool glass as the storm raged outside. His whisper question, "Are you sure?" And her answer pulling him closer. "I was shaking," she murmured, the physical memory returning to her trembling fingers. Not from cold or fear, but from wanting someone with an intensity she'd never experienced. She remembered his hands now, strong but gentle, tracing her curves like mapping treasure. The way he'd studied her face in the lightning flashes, memorizing her reactions. How he'd treated her body like something precious, finding places that made her gasp and arch against him. "You're beautiful," he'd whispered against her skin, and for once in her life, she believed it. The crackle of electricity had matched the energy between them as clothing fell away and they tumbled onto sheets that felt like clouds compared to her dorm bed. His weight above her, the perfect pressure of his body aligning with hers, the careful way he'd made sure she was ready before joining them together. Alyssa's breath caught as she remembered the building pleasure, how she'd dug her nails into his shoulders, how he'd whispered encouragements until she shattered around him, his own release following moments later. They'd fallen asleep tangled together, her head on his chest, his heartbeat her lullaby. But why had she left? Why couldn't she remember the morning after? The phone interrupted her thoughts, Cole's number flashing on the screen. The results came early, he said without preamble when she answered. Elijah is my son. The confirmation should have shocked her, but instead, it settled over her like truth she'd always known. There's more, Cole continued, his voice gentling. I found something that might explain why you don't remember me clearly. Can I come over? Have you ever met someone who left an imprint on your soul, but somehow slipped from your memory? What causes us to forget what might have mattered most? Share your experience. The test confirmed what her heart had started to suspect, but DNA couldn't explain why he disappeared for 4 years, or why he wanted them now. Cole arrived with a folder tucked under his arm, his face more open than she'd seen it before. Relief had softened the sharp edges of his features, making him look younger, more like the man in her returning memories. I brought something, he said, settling at her kitchen table. Medical records from the hospital where you were treated the day after we met. Alyssa tensed. What hospital? I wasn't hurt. You were in a car accident. A taxi hydroplaned on your way home from the hotel. You hit your head. Hard enough for temporary memory issues. The folder contained reports detailing a concussion, along with discharge instructions warning about possible memory gaps. According to the notes, she'd been confused about the previous 24 hours. I paid your hospital bill, Cole added quietly. Left my number with the nurses. But you never called. Why didn't you find me afterward? I tried. All I had was your first name and that you were in nursing school. But then my mother got sick, and I had to focus on her care and keeping the company afloat. By the time I could search again, you'd disappeared. Alyssa's mind raced, filling gaps in her personal timeline. The accident explained why she'd dropped out of nursing school, why she'd missed final exams and lost her scholarship. She'd woken up back in Detroit, moving through life with a strange 4-day hole in her memory and an unexpected pregnancy she couldn't explain. Why now, she asked. After 4 years, I never stopped looking. Then last month, I expanded the search to include janitorial staff in all my buildings. When your son called me daddy, it was like the universe finally aligned. Her skepticism must have shown because he smiled ruefully. I know how it sounds, but I've spent 4 years wondering about the woman who vanished. Alyssa watched through the window as Elijah played on the new code playground equipment below, his laughter floating up to their third-floor apartment. Cole's eyes followed her gaze, something soft and wondering crossing his features. He has your smile, Cole observed. But my eyes. She couldn't deny it. The resemblance was striking when you knew to look for it. Their son's profile highlighted against the setting sun as Cole pushed him on the swing. A picture of what might have been if life hadn't intervened. What happens now? She asked, throat tight with emotion she couldn't name. Whatever feels right. I'd like to know my son. And maybe... His fingers reached across the table, not quite touching hers. Maybe we could see if there's still something between us two. The accidental brush of his hand against hers sent electricity through her veins, awakening sensations she'd forgotten existed. Her body remembered his touch, even if her mind had temporarily lost him. What would you do if someone suddenly appeared with proof they're connected to your child forever? How would you navigate sharing what you've protected alone? I want to hear your thoughts. Overnight, her face became public property, her past an open book, her motherhood questioned by strangers who'd never known hunger or fear. But what terrified her most was the woman who stood behind the cameras, directing it all. The first camera flash caught them by surprise 3 days later. Alyssa and Cole had taken Elijah to the park, testing the waters of co-parenting with an afternoon outing. The photographer appeared from behind a tree, then another from across the street, and suddenly they were surrounded. Mr. Parker, is this your secret family? How long have you been hiding them? Ma'am, did you know about his engagement to Victoria Chun? Alyssa froze at the last question, eyes darting to Cole. His jaw tightened as he scooped Elijah into his arms, shielding the confused child's face against his shoulder. My car now, he ordered, hand firm against the small of her back as he guided them through the shouting crowd. By morning, their faces were splashed across every tabloid in America. Headlines screamed accusations. Tech billionaire's secret baby mama. the cleaner who trapped a fortune. Reporters swarmed like locusts outside her apartment, shouting questions about gold digging and paternity fraud while Elijah cried, confused by the chaos his innocent mistake had created. "We can't stay here," Cole said, watching from the window as more vans pulled up. "Pack whatever you need. You're coming to my place until this dies down." "I can't just leave. You can't stay either. Not with them out there." When a reporter managed to slip past, building security, and pound on her door, Alyssa relented. 20 minutes later, they escaped through the service entrance. Elijah clutched her chest, his little face buried against her neck. Cole's Chicago penthouse sprawled across the top floor of a glass tower, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a view that stole Alyssa's breath. Everything gleamed. Stainless steel, polished wood, spotless marble. Elijah ran from room to room, eyes wide with wonder. 38 floors up means no photographers with telephoto lenses, Cole explained, setting down their bags. "You'll be safe here." "Safe from what, exactly?" Alyssa asked, arms crossed protectively. "You still haven't told me who Victoria Chun is." Cole's expression darkened. "My ex-CEO of Luminous Beauty. We dated for 2 years, ended things 6 months ago when I caught her accessing confidential company files. And now she's what, jealous?" "Victoria doesn't get jealous. She gets even." He pulled out his phone, showing Alyssa an online article with Victoria's perfectly composed face. "She's claiming our relationship was a publicity stunt to hide my real family, that I paid you to come forward right before my company's IPO to manipulate stock prices." Alyssa sank onto a pristine white couch, the enormity of the situation crashing over her. Why would she do this? "Because I have something she wants, controlling interest in facial recognition software her beauty company needs. And because Victoria never lets anyone leave her." The living room suddenly felt too intimate, too domestic. Elijah playing with expensive toys Cole had waiting, their bags mingling in the entryway, Cole's muscular frame blocking out the city lights as he stood protectively near the window. Her phone rang, an unknown number lighting up the screen. "Ms. Davis? This is Cynthia Williams with Child Protective Services. We've received concerning reports about your son's living situation. We'll need to conduct an immediate home visit." Behind her terror, one question burned. How did they get her unlisted number unless someone wanted her child taken away? How would you handle becoming headline news overnight? Would you run from the spotlight or stand your ground? Share what you do if cameras suddenly documented your every move. Victoria Chun had built a billion-dollar beauty empire by destroying competition. Now she was using those same tactics on a cleaning woman who'd never even known they were at war. "She can't just call CPS on me." Alyssa paced Cole's sleek living room the next morning, phone clutched in her hand. "That's not how this works." "Victoria doesn't play by normal rules," Cole replied, fingers flying across his laptop keyboard. "She's built her entire empire on destroying anyone who stands in her way." The social worker had agreed to meet them at Cole's penthouse, a small victory won by his legal team. Now, they waited, the tension crackling between them like live wires. "Tell me about her," Alyssa said suddenly. "What does she have that makes her so dangerous?" Cole's eyes lifted from his screen. "Money, connections, a complete lack of moral boundaries. And most importantly, she has the world convinced she's a feminist icon while she systematically crushes any woman she sees as competition." As if summoned by their conversation, Alyssa's phone chimed with a news alert. Victoria Chun announces emergency press conference. The truth about Cole Parker's family. "She's moving faster than I expected," Cole muttered, immediately dialing his lawyer. The doorbell rang precisely at noon. The social worker, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, spent 2 hours interviewing them separately, examining Elijah's temporary bedroom and watching their interactions. When she left, her expression gave nothing away. "What now?" Alyssa asked, collapsing onto the couch after tucking Elijah in for a nap. "Now we go on offense." Cole sat beside her, close enough that she felt the heat radiating from his body. "My PR team wants us to do an interview, get ahead of whatever Victoria's planning." "An interview? I'm not. I know. But if we don't control the narrative, she will." Their planning session was interrupted by the penthouse elevator's arrival chime. Cole tensed, moving protectively in front of Alyssa as the door slid open. Victoria Chun glided into the apartment like liquid silver, designer heels clicking against marble, red-soled footsteps marking her path toward their position. She was breathtaking. Midnight hair swept into a perfect chignon, crimson lips curved in a smile that never reached her eyes. "Cole, darling." Her voice dripped honey and venom simultaneously. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your housekeeper?" "Get out, Victoria." Victoria ignored him, gaze sliding over Alyssa like she was assessing damaged goods. "I filed for emergency custody evaluation of your son." Alyssa surged to her feet. "You what?" "Based on your history of mental instability and financial desperation." Victoria's smile widened. "The court takes these things very seriously. You have no right. I have every right to protect Cole's interests when he's clearly being manipulated." Her perfectly manicured hand touched Cole's arm possessively. "We both know what she's after, darling." Cole shook off her touch. "This isn't a game, Victoria. Back off now, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly how you built luminous beauty." Victoria's mask slipped for a second, raw fury flashing in her eyes before the perfect smile returned. "See you both at my press conference tomorrow. I've invited some special guests who know all about Ms. Davis's creative approach to motherhood." After she left, Cole found Alyssa in Elijah's room, watching her sleeping son with fierce protectiveness. "She can't take him," Alyssa whispered. "I won't let her." Cole's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Neither will I." The touch sparked something primal between them. Fear, need, and determination creating a volatile cocktail. When his eyes met hers, Alyssa saw the same hunger she felt burning through her veins. Without words, they moved together, lips meeting in a desperate clash that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with claiming territory against a common enemy. Whenever you face someone who seemed to hold all the power, how did you find your strength in that moment? I'd love to hear your stories of standing up to intimidation. She agreed to the charade for her son's protection, pretending to love the man who might have once meant something to her, before life and memory tore them apart. "This interview needs to look authentic," Cole's publicist explained, adjusting Alyssa's collar while makeup artists hovered nearby. "America loves a love story. Give them one." The television interview was scheduled for that evening, a strategic countermove against Victoria's press conference. Sitting under hot lights, Alyssa fought the urge to run as cameras rolled. "So tell us." The interviewer leaned forward with practiced interest. "How did you two reconnect after all these years?" Cole's hand covered Alyssa's, warm and steady. "Some connections can't be broken, even by time or circumstance. When I saw Alyssa again, everything fell into place. And your son? He must be thrilled to finally have his father in his life." Alyssa found her voice. Elijah recognized Cole immediately. Children sense these things sometimes before adults do. The practiced lines felt strange on her tongue, but Cole's supportive squeeze anchored her. They weren't exactly lies, just carefully curated truths packaged for public consumption. The charade continued when they left the studio, Cole's arm wrapped protectively around her waist as they navigated past photographers. His touch burned through the thin fabric of her borrowed dress, awakening nerves she'd long forgotten existed. "You did great," he murmured against her ear as they slipped into his waiting car. She turned to face him in the dim back seat. "How long do we have to keep this up?" "Until Victoria backs down or we find leverage against her." "And then what?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. That night, they attended a charity gala, another strategic appearance to reinforce their relationship narrative. The ballroom sparkled with wealth and whispers, eyes following their every move as Cole guided her across the polished floor, his hand at the small of her back, both protective and possessive. "Everyone's staring," Alyssa whispered, uncomfortable in the designer gown Cole's stylist had selected. "Let them." His voice dropped lower, just for her ears. "You outshine everyone here." The orchestra began playing, and Cole led her to the dance floor. "We should dance," he said. Complete the picture. His arm encircled her waist, drawing her against his chest. The solid warmth of him, muscle and cologne and steady heartbeat, made her dizzy with conflicting emotions. This close, she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, feel the controlled strength in his body as he guided her through the steps. "This feels familiar," she admitted quietly. "Like we've danced before." A genuine smile touched his lips. "We did. That night at the hotel. They had a piano bar." The memory surfaced, swaying in a corner of the hotel lounge, rain pounding against windows, his cheek against her hair. The same chemistry that had drawn them together then pulsed between them now, undimmed by years and circumstances. "Cole," she breathed, their faces inches apart. "I know," he whispered back. "I feel it too. Have you ever pretended feelings until they became real? What's the line between protecting yourself and lying to your own heart? Share your experience with complicated emotions." The photograph shattered his faith in seconds, proof that while he'd spent years searching for her, she might have been plotting against him all along. They returned to the penthouse, riding the high of their successful public appearances. The television interview had played well, social media rallying behind their reconnection story. For the first time since the media storm began, Alyssa felt a flicker of hope. That hope died the next morning when Cole's lawyer arrived, grim-faced and carrying a manila envelope. Victoria's attorney submitted these to the court this morning, he explained, spreading photographs across the glass coffee table. Cole went still beside her, his body tensing as they both stared at the images. The first showed Alyssa, for years ago, entering a building. The second captured her shaking hands with Marcus Lee, Cole's biggest business rival. "This was taken the day after we met," Cole said, voice dangerously quiet. "You went straight from my hotel to my competitor's office." The accusation hung in the air between them, sharp as broken glass. "I don't remember this," Alyssa insisted, though something tugged at the edges of her memory. A desperate decision, a last resort meeting. "Victoria's attorney claims you were hired to extract information from me." Cole stood, putting distance between them. "That Elijah was never an accident, but part of a long-term plan to infiltrate my company. That's ridiculous. I didn't even know who you were that night." "Then explain these." He pushed another photo toward her, surveillance footage showing her entering Lee Technologies multiple times over a 2-week period before their hotel meeting. His penthouse, once a sanctuary, turned arctic as he paced before floor-to-ceiling windows. The cityscape that represented his kingdom spread below, while everything inside crumbled with each accusation. "Cole, please. There must be an explanation. I've heard enough explanations." His voice hardened. The warmth she'd glimpsed completely vanished. "Victoria warned me you were playing me. I didn't want to believe her. So you believe her now? After everything she's done? The evidence is right here." He slammed his hand on the photos. "While I searched for you, worried about you, you were working with a man trying to destroy my company." Alyssa stood, anger replacing her initial shock. "You don't know anything about my life then, what I was dealing with, what I needed to survive." "Then tell me," he challenged, moving closer until she could feel the heat of his anger. "What possible reason could you have for meeting my biggest competitor the day after sleeping with me?" The proximity ignited something dangerous between them, rage and attraction creating a volatile combination. His eyes dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to glare at her. "I was desperate," she admitted, voice breaking. "The scholarship was gone. I had no money, no future. I needed a job, any job. And Lee offered you one in exchange for information about me?" "No. I don't know. I don't remember the details." Cole's laugh was bitter. Convenient memory loss again. His dismissal stung worse than any accusation. Alyssa shoved against his chest, tears burning her eyes. "You have no idea what I've been through, what I've sacrificed for my son, our son." He caught her wrists, their bodies colliding as anger transformed into something equally powerful. For one electric moment, they teetered on the edge of violence or passion. Then his mouth crashed down on hers. "Well, have you been falsely accused of something that threatened everything you cared about?" How do you prove a negative? Tell me about a time when appearances were stacked against your truth. Her memory returned like shattered glass reassembling, cutting deeper with each piece that clicked into place, revealing a past neither of them had fully understood. The kiss broke something loose inside Alyssa's mind. A flood of memories surging forward with such force, she gasped, pushing away from Cole's embrace. "I remember," she whispered, pressing her fingertips to her temples. "I remember everything now." Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring that night 4 years ago as she finally told the whole truth. How she'd been desperate for work after losing her scholarship. How the hotel bar had been her last interview hope. How the storm had trapped them together when all other options disappeared. "After I left your hotel, I got the call that my mother had overdosed again," she said, voice hollow. "The hospital bills were thousands of dollars I didn't have. I was 19, alone, with no one to help me." Cole listened silently, his anger giving way to wary attention. "Marcus Lee approached me outside the hospital. Said he recognized me from leaving your hotel." She closed her eyes, the memory painful. "He offered to pay my mother's medical bills if I'd tell him what you and I discussed." "And did you?" "We didn't discuss business, Cole. We talked about growing up poor, about our mothers, about dreams. There was nothing to tell him." Her eyes opened, meeting his directly. "But I needed that money, so I went to meetings, pretended I knew things. I made up stories about your company plans until he realized I had nothing valuable and stopped calling." "Then why not tell me this from the beginning?" "Because I've spent years being ashamed of what I did." The words burst from her. "Because I lied to a man for money while my mother died anyway. Because by the time I found out I was pregnant, I couldn't remember who the father was. Only that I'd been with someone special before everything fell apart." Cole sank onto the couch, processing her words. "The accident damaged more than just your memory of me. The doctors said trauma can cause selective memory blocks. Between the concussion, my mother's death, and losing my future, I guess my mind protected me by forgetting the good parts too." Outside, lightning flashed across the Chicago skyline. So similar to the night they'd met that it seemed the universe was realigning them to that moment. "I believed in something that night," Cole admitted quietly. "In you, in possibilities. When you disappeared, I thought." He stopped, vulnerability raw in his expression. "I thought I'd imagine the connection." Alyssa moved toward him slowly, kneeling before him. "You didn't imagine it." Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining as the final pieces of memory slotted into place. His touch felt like coming home, familiar yet new, as if her body had always remembered what her mind had forgotten. This time when they came together, it wasn't fueled by anger or pretense. His lips traced the path they'd discovered years ago, relearning curves and hollows while she rediscovered the weight of him, the perfect fit of their bodies. "Stay with me," he whispered against her skin. "No more running, no more forgetting." They moved together in the storm-shadowed penthouse, rediscovering a connection that had never truly broken. Each touch healed another fracture. Each kiss bridged another gap in time. When they finally lay breathless in each other's arms, the world outside seemed distant and unimportant. "We're going to fight, Victoria," Cole said, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Together. No more secrets between us." As understanding dawned in his eyes, her phone rang, the social worker's voice tight with urgency. "Ms. Davis, new evidence has been submitted in your case. Someone has provided records suggesting you were institutionalized during your pregnancy. We're expediting our investigation." How do trauma and survival shape the choices we make? Have you ever made difficult decisions that others might judge without knowing your full story? I want to hear your perspective. She vanished before dawn, taking their son away from the spotlight, the accusations, and the man who was finally beginning to feel like home. Cole woke to an empty bed and a hollow feeling in his chest. The space beside him still held Alyssa's warmth, but her scent was all that remained. He knew before checking that she and Elijah were gone. A single note lay on the kitchen counter. "I can't let them take him. I'm sorry." The penthouse felt cavernous without them, empty rooms echoing with possibilities cut short. Cole's security team confirmed what he already knew. Alyssa had slipped out during the early morning shift change, using the service elevator to avoid cameras. She disabled the tracking on her phone, his head of security reported. Withdrew cash from 3 different ATMs across the city. She knows how to disappear. Cole stared out at the Chicago skyline, fists clenched at his sides. Find them, he ordered, before Victoria does. Days pass with no leads. Victoria's evidence about Alyssa's supposed institutionalization had been submitted to family court, triggering an emergency custody investigation. The social worker called repeatedly, her concern growing with each unanswered message. "Sir," his assistant interrupted his brooding on the 7th day. "We've found something. A property record from rural Michigan under the name Elizabeth Davis, Alyssa's mother. Her childhood home stood weathered but proud in rural Michigan, surrounded by apple trees and silence. The last place anyone would look for a woman connected to one of America's wealthiest men. Cole drove there himself, refusing security escorts that might alert Victoria's network of paid informants. The farmhouse appeared abandoned at first glance. Peeling paint, overgrown garden, a weathered tire swing hanging motionless from an ancient oak. But smoke curled faintly from the chimney, and when he approached the porch, a familiar voice called from inside. "Go away. I have a gun." "It's me," Cole answered, hands raised though she couldn't see them. "I'm alone." The door opened a crack, revealing Alyssa's exhausted face. "How did you find us?" "The same way Victoria would eventually." "Please let me in." Elijah's excited squeal broke the tension. The boy racing past his mother to launch himself at Cole's legs. Daddy came. Inside, the house was sparse but clean, filled with faded photographs of a younger Alyssa and an older woman with her same determined eyes. "You shouldn't have run," Cole said after Elijah had been settled with crayons and paper at the kitchen table. "They were going to take him." Her voice broke. "Those records Victoria submitted, they're fake. I was never institutionalized. I know that now." Cole reached for her hand across the worn kitchen table. "My investigators found proof she fabricated everything. Medical records, witness statements, all of it. We can fight this, Alyssa, together." His car had appeared on the distant dirt road, like a mirage. Impossible and inevitable. But what made her heart stop wasn't his arrival. It was what he carried. Documents proving Victoria had fabricated everything, including medical records, in a desperate attempt to control him through any means necessary. Would you run to protect those you love, even if it broke your own heart? Have you ever had to choose between safety and possibility? Share your most difficult choice in the comments. Victoria had built her empire by destroying evidence of her past, but she never counted on facing a cleaning woman who'd spent years erasing other people's mistakes. "These aren't just custody lies," Cole explained, spreading documents across the farmhouse table. "Victoria's been falsifying testing data for luminous beauty products for years. Women have been injured by creams that never passed safety trials." Alyssa studied the paperwork, internal emails, altered lab reports, paid-off dermatologists. "How did you get these?" Her former lab director came forward after she fired him. He kept copies of everything as insurance. The strategy room in Cole's lake house transformed into a war room. Documents covering every surface, digital trails projected on screens, as they pieced together the elaborate web of deceit Victoria had spun around both their lives. They'd moved to Cole's secluded property on Lake Michigan, a modern retreat hidden by dense forest and state-of-the-art security. Here, away from prying eyes, they could plan their counterattack. "She's been building this case against me for months," Alyssa realized, reviewing Victoria's detailed dossier on her life. Bank records, employment history, even Elijah's medical visits, all twisted to paint me as unstable. "Victoria never leaves anything to chance," Cole agreed, his hand resting on her shoulder. "She targeted you the moment she realized you might be the woman I'd been looking for." Alyssa paused on a document showing Victoria's company finances. "Wait, look at these numbers. The IPO isn't just about growth. She's desperate for cash." Cole leaned closer, his chest pressing against her back as they examined the spreadsheets together. The proximity sent warmth cascading through Alyssa's body, a constant awareness that hadn't diminished despite their focus on survival. "You're right," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "She's overextended. The new product line is her Hail Mary. Without it, her whole company collapses," Alyssa finished. "And that product depends on your facial recognition technology." They worked through the night, building their case methodically. By dawn, they had a battle plan, evidence to counter Victoria's custody claims, proof of her corporate fraud, and documentation of her harassment campaign. "This could work," Cole said, rubbing his tired eyes. "But the timing has to be perfect. Victoria's press conference is tomorrow, 1 hour before my company's IPO announcement." Alyssa stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours hunched over documents. "Then we'd better get some rest." Cole caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Alyssa, wait." His voice dropped lower, vulnerable in a way few people ever heard. "If this works, when this works, what happens with us?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibility and fear. Instead of answering with words, Alyssa moved into his arms, her mouth finding his with a certainty that erased all doubt. They celebrated their breakthrough with desperate hands and hungry kisses, tumbling onto the couch in a tangle of limbs and discarded plans. Each touch affirmed their partnership, each gasp a promise of something deeper than alliance. When they finally came together, it felt like sealing a pact written in skin and bone and breath. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with moonlight painting silver paths across their bodies, Alyssa finally answered his question. "We build something real, something that doesn't need pretending." The IPO announcement date loomed 24 hours away when Victoria's final play emerged. A press conference scheduled 1 hour before, promising shocking revelations about Cole Parker's family deception with a special guest, Alyssa's estranged mother, whom she hadn't seen in 10 years. Have you ever joined forces with someone to face a common enemy? Does shared purpose create deeper connection than chemistry alone? Tell me about your most powerful alliance. Her mother had abandoned her at 17. Now she was back, ready to sell a new version of abandonment to the highest bidder. "My mother died 6 years ago," Alyssa whispered, staring at the press release announcing Elizabeth Davis's appearance. "Overdose in a Detroit motel." Cole wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Victoria found someone willing to play the part. We need to confront this imposter before she goes public." For hours later, they walked into a downtown Chicago hotel suite. The woman waiting inside was a skilled impersonation, similar coloring to the woman in Alyssa's childhood photos, coached on enough details to seem convincing to strangers. The hotel suite where her mother waited felt suspended in time, expensive but hollow, like the woman herself, perfectly dressed in clothes that still had price tags attached, ready for her moment in the spotlight. "Where did Victoria find you?" Cole asked directly. The woman's practiced smile faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a mother who—" "My mother had a scar across her right palm," Alyssa interrupted, "from grabbing a broken bottle during one of her drunk fights." "Show me your hand." The woman's confidence crumbled under Alyssa's steady gaze. After a moment of hesitation, she admitted Victoria had hired her from an acting agency, provided a script of memories to share at the press conference. "She's paying me $10,000, the woman confessed. Said it was just business, nothing personal. "It's very personal," Alyssa replied, voice steady despite the storm inside her. "She's using my dead mother to try to take my son." They left with the woman's signed confession and Victoria's detailed instructions, evidence of witness tampering to add to their growing case. "Are you okay?" Cole asked in the elevator, studying Alyssa's composed face with concern. She met his eyes, strength and vulnerability balanced in her expression. "I mourned my mother years ago, the real one, not this fiction Victoria created. The woman who loved me before addiction took her away." Back at the lake house, Cole held her through the inevitable breakdown, arms strong around her as she finally released years of grief kept carefully contained. He listened as she shared memories of her childhood. The good days when her mother was sober, the endless cycle of recovery and relapse, The final abandonment that left 17-year-old Alyssa alone and determined never to depend on anyone again. "You did more than survive," Cole whispered against her hair. "You built a life for yourself and Elijah from nothing. That's not just strength, that's extraordinary." Their bodies sought comfort and connection, gentle touches replacing words as they reaffirmed their bond. Unlike their previous encounters fueled by urgency or passion, this coming together felt like healing. Each kiss covering old wounds, each caress promising protection. As they lay entwined in the aftermath, Alyssa's phone lit up with an unknown number. Her son's excited voice cutting through. "Mommy, the pretty lady said I could call you before we go on TV." In the background, Victoria's unmistakable voice instructed someone to hurry with the suit fitting. The phone clattered to the floor as Alyssa bolted upright, terror replacing peace. "She has Elijah." Cole was already moving, grabbing car keys and phone. "Ow!" The security team, his babysitter, Alyssa realized with horror. "The new one your staff hired yesterday. It must have been Victoria's plant. How do you face someone who was supposed to protect you, but chose to hurt you instead? Is forgiveness always possible, or are some bridges meant to stay burned?" Share your thoughts on family healing. Victoria had miscalculated badly. She'd taken a mother's child, not realizing that even the gentlest women become lions when their cubs are threatened. They raced to the Chicago Convention Center, where Victoria's press conference was scheduled, breaking every speed limit. Cole's urgent calls mobilized a security team and legal counsel, while Alyssa clutched the phone, trying repeatedly to call back the number Elijah had used. "She won't hurt him," Cole assured her, eyes fixed on the road. "Victoria wants leverage, not a kidnapping charge. You don't know what desperate people will do," Alyssa countered, her voice hollow with fear. "She's cornered, and cornered animals are the most dangerous." The convention center bustled with media activity, cameras, lighting rigs, reporters checking equipment. Victoria had chosen a spectacle worthy of her dramatic reveal. A full stage with branded backdrop, teleprompters, and seating for hundreds of press representatives. Through a side entrance, they glimpsed Victoria backstage, resplendent in a power suit, makeup artists touching up her already flawless appearance. Beside her stood Elijah, uncomfortable in a mini tuxedo, a production assistant keeping him occupied with a tablet. "There's our boy," Cole breathed, relief and rage battling in his voice. Alyssa moved with singular purpose, striding toward security barriers with Cole at her side. When guards blocked their path, Cole didn't argue. He simply made a call that had the convention center's owner personally escorting them backstage within minutes. Victoria's perfect composure cracked when she spotted them approaching. "How did you?" "Taking a child across state lines without parental consent is federal kidnapping," Cole stated coldly. "The FBI has been notified." Elijah spotted them and broke free from his handler. "Mommy, Daddy," he cried, running toward them as cameras swiveled to capture the unexpected drama. The press conference erupted into chaos as they burst through the doors, cameras swinging wildly from Victoria's perfectly composed face to their determined entrance, their son breaking free from handlers to run straight into Alyssa's arms as flashbulbs captured the reunion. Victoria recovered quickly, voice honeyed for the rolling cameras. "Cole, Alyssa, what a surprise. We were just about to discuss your unusual situation. By parading our son without permission," Alyssa challenged, lifting Elijah into her arms. "I was simply giving the public the truth they deserve about Cole's divided loyalties before his company goes public tomorrow." Cole stepped forward, positioning himself between Victoria and his family. "You want truth, Victoria? Let's give him truth." He turned to address the assembled media, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "Victoria Chun has engaged in a systematic campaign of harassment, false claims, and now child abduction to prevent my company's independence from her influence." Victoria lunged for the microphone. "He's lying to protect his mistress and illegitimate child." Cole remained calm, producing a flash drive. "This contains evidence of Ms. Chen's corporate fraud, product safety violations, and witness tampering. It's being delivered to the SEC, FDA and prosecutors' offices as we speak. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Victoria's perfect features. You wouldn't dare. Your IPO is postponed indefinitely, Cole finished. Some investments matter more than others. His hand found Alyssa's, their fingers intertwining as they presented a united front before the flashing cameras. The image would grace tomorrow's business pages. The tech genius, the determined mother, and the child who had brought them together. Security escorted a seething Victoria from the stage as reporters shouted questions. Cole answered none of them, focusing instead on guiding his family through the chaos to the waiting car. That night, as their son slept safely between them in Cole's lake house, exhausted from the day's drama, Cole traced gentle patterns on Alyssa's shoulder across the small gap. I meant what I said today, he whispered in the darkness. About postponing the IPO. About priorities. Your company will still be there when we're ready. When we've had time to figure this out. His eyes searched hers in the moonlight. What if we make this real, Alyssa? Not for cameras or courts or protection. For us. What would you sacrifice to protect your family? When have you discovered strength you never knew you had? I want to hear about your moment of standing tallest. Their beginning had been an accident of fate. Their future would be a deliberate choice, built on truth rather than circumstance or DNA. 6 months passed. Victoria faced federal charges for corporate fraud and child endangerment. Her beauty empire crumbled as safety violations came to light. Cole's company thrived under new leadership while he took a temporary step back, prioritizing family over fortune. And in that space of grace, something authentic bloomed between Cole and Alyssa. Not the desperate connection of crisis or the forced intimacy of pretense, but something built on shared morning coffee, Elijah's bedtime stories, and quiet conversations that stretched into dawn. I never thought I'd have this, Alyssa admitted one evening as they walked along the lakeshore, Elijah running ahead collecting shells. Someone who sees all of me, the mess, the mistakes, the strength, and chooses to stay anyway. I spent 4 years looking for a woman I barely knew, Cole replied, his fingers laced with hers. Turns out I needed to find her so she could help me discover who I really am beyond the company and the money. They moved into a brownstone in a quiet Chicago neighborhood, close enough to both their worlds, but belonging fully to neither. Elijah started kindergarten. Alyssa enrolled in nursing school again, finishing the degree life had interrupted. Cole launched a foundation providing medical and educational support for single parents. The lakeside ceremony was small but radiant. Just family and close friends beneath a canopy of autumn leaves. Their son proudly carrying rings while wearing a miniature version of his father's suit, his smile a perfect blend of both their features. Cole's voice remained steady as he spoke his vows, though his hands trembled slightly holding hers. "I'm not asking you to be mine," he said, the words carrying across the hushed gathering. "I'm asking if we could be each other's, equal partners, building something neither of us could create alone." Alyssa's answer came without hesitation. Years of protective walls, finally unnecessary in the safety of his gaze. Later, in the privacy of their honeymoon suite overlooking the same lake where they'd found refuge, their bodies came together with the familiarity of practiced lovers and the wonder of new discovery. His hands traced paths they'd mapped together. Across the curve of her hip, the hollow of her throat, the places that made her gasp his name like a prayer. "I've been thinking," she whispered afterward, her head resting on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, "about how strange it is that Elijah recognized you that first day. Almost like he knew somehow." Cole's fingers traced idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "Children see clearly sometimes. No baggage, no past, just truth." "Truth," she repeated, testing the word. "Our story started with hiding from it and ends with choosing it." He lifted her chin, eyes meeting hers with quiet certainty. Every day, a choice to stay, to build, to love. As she slipped the ring onto her finger during their ceremony, a thought had struck her with such clarity it took her breath away. This wasn't just about them anymore. There was something she needed to tell him, something that would change everything again. Now, In the peaceful aftermath of their lovemaking, she took his hand and placed it gently against her stomach. "We're having another baby," she whispered. The wonder that transformed his face, from shock to joy to overwhelming love, mirrored the journey they'd traveled from strangers to family. The body she once offered as sacrifice now created life by choice, the ultimate testament to what happens when love sees dignity instead of desperation. "Our child," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Chosen this time, known from the beginning. Do you believe some souls recognize each other instantly, even when our minds need time to catch up? Has a child's wisdom ever opened your eyes to what was meant to be? Share your story of unexpected connections. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that explore how mistakes can sometimes lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Tell me in the comments which part of their journey resonated most with you. And remember, sometimes the family we build from broken pieces becomes our greatest masterpiece.